Hey guys, I'm Donnie Godseed, and we're going to be covering the 7 different pathways in our horizontal relationships. Now, this is still part of that God triangle, also known as a God ask. And what's amazing about that is you're including God in these conversations, in these pathways, but also getting things clear with Him first before trying to get something straightened out with somebody else. Along these pathways, walls can form, and that can come from a lack of trust or value between two people. Now, I want to affirm something. The only person who's trustworthy is Jesus. But since you're one with Him, then you and the other person, if you're a Christian, are trustworthy as well. We're going to look at how to help these 7 different pathways, but it all starts with communication. We want to get the conflict and communication pathway cleaned up first so the others stand a chance, right? One of the first things that comes to mind when it comes to communication and conflict is the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. So keep a cool head and work through these things. As a matter of fact, this Clover tool is super powerful. It's just awesome. And it pulls in everything that we've been teaching on so far. And if you've mastered how to apply these other things, then using the Clover tool will be a very natural outgrowth of what you've been learning so far. And man, is it awesome. Remember in the very first video, I was telling you about how sometimes people come to us out of grief or some other complication related to grief, but yet when they leave, they feel like that their marriage or their relationship is just so much better than when they came in. It's because of this tool right here. And I can't wait for you to see it, how to apply it for communication and conflict. Another hot tip has to do with listening to the other person in order to understand where they are before you try to be understood. So many times we've got 2 different people who are trying to be understood instead of using that same energy to understand the other person, which makes for a much more pleasant communication and an easier way to diffuse tension or conflict. As I mentioned, sometimes the conflict that we have has to do with that we're trying to get a God need met with the other person. And again, that kind of looks more like that soul ask where we're engaging the other person to try to meet our needs, or we're trying to engage the other person with their mind, will, and emotions, or what have you, instead of engaging the Lord. So here's an amazing technique called drop the rope. And this is something that my wife and I kind of came up with early on in our marriage when we realized that sometimes the other person is trying to get some kind of God issue met through you. And that's no fun because it's got this conflict or whatever's going on. And no matter what the other person does, the person who's needy at that moment won't get it out of this other person. So they keep trying to engage them. So let's just give an example where, let's say I was approaching my wife and there was something I was worried about that really is a conversation that needs to happen between me and God. But for whatever reason, I'm trying to rag out my spouse with this need, this conflict. And so no matter what she says or what she does, it's not going to satisfy whatever the heck's going on. And that's one of the clues that this is more of a God thing than an us thing. And so now the other person is left with, well, how in the world did I resolve this? And it goes like this. And this is literally this phrase that you use. Honey, I love you very much, but I want you to know that it seems like that your real tension isn't with me, but maybe it's something that you need to be working out with the Lord. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to drop the rope in this tug of war that we got going on. But this is not abandonment. And I want you to know that I'm going to back up and give you and God the space to kind of work things out. And I'm going to be praying for you because I love you. And I want you to get this resolved with Him so that we can enjoy each other too without this tension going on. All right? Sound good? And that little conversation right there kind of sets the stage to let the one spouse know that they're not being abandoned, but you're also kind of backing up and creating space here so that you're not in this tug of war. And as you create space, it gives God elbow room to step in there and have that conversation. And sometimes people will feel like, well, if I back up, then this, they're not going to get this thing resolved. And that's not true. Because when we make space, now who's picking up the rope is the Lord. And that tension is now between this person and this person. So part of the trick is not jumping back into the fight or not getting roped into it if the other spouse is, trying to get you pulled back in. You just keep saying, honey, I love you. We're not going to fight over this. I want you to talk it out with the Lord first. Hear what he has to say. I'm going to be praying with you about this, okay? I'll be praying for you, but I'm going to drop the rope so that this does not become an escalated conflict. Okie doke? There are times that's very applicable and some that isn't, and that's if there really is a legitimate conflict between two people. But if this is, again, like I said, some God issue that's lit up and the other spouse is trying to get that God need met through the other person, then that's the best way to handle it. Now, when it comes to a tug of war between this person over here and the Lord, who's going to win that, right? God doesn't have to tug around. He just kind of holds on to it and lets you wear yourself out. And finally, you're like, oh, all right, fine, Lord. What is it that you're trying to tell me? What is it that I need to do here? And then, in our case, I get the discernment on what it is that the Lord's been trying to tell me or whatever anxiety or tension that I'm having. And once that's cooled off and dealt with, I can now approach my spouse and say, you know what, thank you. Thank you for praying for me. Thank you for letting me know that you weren't abandoning me or something weird like that. And I can now rest in God's answer. And so it's really not an issue anymore. Thank you. I've taught this at marriage conferences. We've had people who lead marriage conferences say, man, that's a great way to handle that thing. I'm like, I know, right? I am so thankful for the Lord showing us that. I hope it serves you well.